Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we try to make sense of some really dense material. Today, we are definitely strapping in for a wild intellectual ride.
We really are.
Our subject is Johann Gottlieb Fichte. He's this, well, often overlooked figure in German idealism, hugely important, though.
Yeah, he gets sandwiched between Kant and Hegel, doesn't he? People sometimes just skip him. But honestly, he's that crucial, maybe volatile bridge between them.
Volatile is a good word.
He basically took Kant's toolkit and really pushed philosophy somewhere completely new, maybe off a cliff, you could say. He insisted that everything, reality, knowledge, all of it, had to come purely from consciousness itself.
And driving all that was this absolute focus on freedom with a capital F, almost an obsession.
Totally.
It wasn't enough for freedom to be just, a nice idea or something we hope for. Like Kant sort of treated it in his ethics.
Right, like a postulate.
Exactly. For Fichte, freedom had to be the rock bottom foundation, the verifiable starting point for everything.
His big goal was crafting what he called the first truly complete system of freedom, something purely intellectual, purely self-derived. So yeah, we're diving into his major works, the Wissenschaftslehre, his political stuff, the critiques, to really get a handle on it.
Okay, so our mission here is to unpack some of Fichte's really explosive ideas. I mean, defining God as just moral order, or arguing for a totally state-run, closed economy. Wild stuff.
Definitely.
Let's try and figure out why he's still relevant, even if people always introduce him as just the guy after Kant.
Sounds good. Well, the place to start has to be with pure action, his huge theoretical work, the Wissenschaftslehre.
Which means science of knowledge, right?
Yeah, science of knowledge, or maybe science of science itself.
And he kicks things off with a pretty hefty critique of Kant, doesn't he? Calling Kant only semi-idealist. That's bold.
It really is. Coming from someone seen as Kant's successor.
Yeah.
What he meant was essentially that Kant didn't go far enough. Kant kept the ding in such the thing in itself.
The noumenon.
Exactly. That unknowable reality sort of lurking outside our minds. And Fichte saw that as like the last chain holding philosophy back. Why allow anything external, anything non-mental, to have a role?
So the Wissenschaftslehre was meant to be the ultimate foundation, the system underlying all other knowledge.
That was the ambition. And he's adamant that the starting point can't be passive. It can't be something we just receive. It has to be pure activity.
Okay, so his core idea is the I, the ich.
Which posits itself. It brings itself into being through an absolute original act. He calls it the Tathandlung.
The deed act.
The deed act. And this is where he drops that philosophical bombshell.
Right, instead of the classic, in the beginning was the word.
He flips it. In the beginning was the deed, or action, ilum.
Wow. That fundamentally changes everything. Existence isn't static, it's not received, it's dynamic, self-creating.
Exactly. The ground of reality isn't a substance or a concept, it's an act. A pure, uncaused assertion of being.
Okay, but we need to be super clear about who this I is. It's not me, right? It's not the individual person thinking these thoughts.
Absolutely crucial point. This isn't your personal psychological self. Fichte's I, sometimes called ich, it's more like a super individual universal consciousness. Think of it as reason itself, but active.
So, like, if universal reason is the ocean, my individual mind is just a wave, a specific manifestation.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
We're each a specific instance, a determined part of that universal rational activity. And reality itself, the world we see, emerges from a kind of necessary conflict within this I.
How so?
Well, the I is fundamentally active and, in principle, unlimited. But to become aware of itself, it has to set a limit. It needs something to define itself against.
Ah, okay. This sounds like the beginning of that dialectical process we see later in Hegel.
It absolutely is a precursor. The absolute I posits itself. Then, necessarily, it posits its opposite, the non-I, the Ben-Mayan.
And the non-I is the objective world, nature, everything that seems out there.
Precisely. It's the passive, determined world we perceive. The whole phenomenal universe is basically generated by this fundamental opposition, this checking process.
But wait, if the objective world, the non-I, is only there because the I limited itself, doesn't that make nature just a projection? Doesn't that lead straight to solipsism, the idea that only my mind exists?
It was the major criticism thrown at him constantly. But Fichte's got a sophisticated way around it. He argues the I is always the primary active force. The non-I only gets its reality, its thingness, because the I posits it.
So we can't just wish the non-I away.
No. because it's essential. It's the necessary friction. It's the arena where the I acts and through acting becomes conscious of its own freedom.
Okay, so the universe is the stage for the I asserting itself against the passive non-I. That leads us right into his ethics, the Sittenlehre, doesn't it?
Directly. Because now freedom isn't just a theoretical starting point. It becomes a practical moral duty.
His ethics seem very formal, kind of Kantian in structure, but the goal is different.
The structure borrows from Kant, yes, very formalist. But the ultimate aim is self-realization. The core duty for each individual is to actively realize and perfect this universal I within themselves. And how do you do that? By consciously striving against and overcoming the resistance of the non-I, of nature, of passivity.
I saw a quote in the sources outlining his main ethical principle, and it sounded, well, almost hedonistic if you take it literally. Realize your own desires each time.
Right. Sounds weird out of context. But desire here means rational will, determined action based on the moral law within. It's the absolute opposite of hedonism.
Ah.
He's demanding constant, conscious, meaningful action. You must not act based on mere impulse or natural inclination. You act only to fulfill the rational duty that stems from the I. And that's where you hear the loud echo of Kant's categorical imperative.
Act on universal principle.
Exactly. But Fichte links freedom to existence itself more radically than Kant did. He makes freedom an ontological requirement.
How does that work?
He basically argues that to exist meaningfully, you need freedom. And crucially, for freedom to even be possible, you need space and time.
So space and time aren't just how we perceive things, like Kant's forms of intuition?
For Fichte, they're more fundamental. They are the ontological conditions for action. Any free act, any Tathandlung, has to occur somewhere and sometime. Without space and time, there's no possibility of action, which means no possibility of freedom manifesting, and thus no real effective existence for the I.
That's a deep connection. And this idea of acting in the world seems to lead him to split freedom into two types.
Yeah, this distinction is key for understanding how he gets to his rather extreme political ideas. He talks about formal freedom and material freedom.
Formal freedom is?
That's the pure inner autonomy, the independence of the rational self from any external cause. It's the abstract freedom inherent in the I, very Kantian still. Though later, around 1801, he apparently backed away from seeing this as the absolute basis for knowledge.
Interesting. And material freedom.
That's freedom in the real world. Freedom realized within the concrete limits of society, law, the state. You need material freedom to actually do things, to give content to that abstract, formal freedom.
You can't just be free in your head. You need the conditions to act freely.
Exactly. And Fichte decides that if you want real, material freedom for everyone, you need a very specific kind of society. And that means you need a very specific and very powerful state.
Okay, let's make that jump into a socio-political thought. It flows from the ethics, the Sittenlehre, right? If the goal is self-realization through action, how does that work when you've got millions of people trying to do it at once?
Right. Chaos, potentially. Fichte basically dismisses the idea that natural law existing before the state is enough to manage things. For him, the state isn't just convenient, it's metaphysically necessary.
Necessary why?
Because it's the only thing capable of enforcing the rules, the compulsion needed to guarantee everyone's basic right, life, property, security. Paradoxically, the state has to limit individual freedom to make peaceful coexistence, and thus meaningful freedom possible at all.
Which brings us to his most infamous political text from 1800, der geschlossene Handelsstaat, the closed commercial state.
Infamous is right. It's utopian, maybe dystopian, depending on your view, and intensely controversial. Even he knew it was unlikely to ever happen.
What was he trying to achieve with this total system?
He was trying to solve the problem of economic anarchy and inequality, basically. The goal was complete economic stability, guaranteeing the welfare of every single citizen and providing absolute security. This, for him, was the necessary basis for real material freedom.
And the proposed policies are pretty extreme.
Extremely. Autarky, a complete ban on almost all foreign trade.
No imports, no exports.
Only if absolutely unavoidable, and even then, it had to be the state doing the trading, not private companies or individuals.
Why such drastic control? What was he afraid of?
He wanted to prevent wealth hoarding, market crashes, speculation, the things he saw destabilizing society and making genuine freedom impossible for the average person.
The state would manage resource distribution, set prices, and ensure everyone got a fair share based on their work contribution.
It definitely has that proto-socialist feel, focusing on collective welfare.
Yeah.
The state guarantees everyone's basic material needs.
Yes. But therein lies the massive tension, the core dilemma in his political thought.
Which is?
To guarantee this universal security and material freedom, he requires near-total state control over the economy. That level of regulation inherently crushes individual economic liberties, entrepreneurship, that kind of thing.
So freedom requires its opposite.
Yeah.
Total control. How did he square that circle? His justification was stark. This level of control is the only way to secure the most fundamental freedoms: life, basic needs, security from chaos. Without those guaranteed, abstract formal freedom is meaningless. He seemed to believe the dangers of an uncontrolled private economy were far greater than the dangers of state control. Security first, then meaningful freedom becomes possible.
Wow. It's a compelling, if slightly terrifying, logic. From the absolute I to the absolute state. We should probably also touch on his equally controversial religious views.
Absolutely. Led to a huge scandal, the the Atheism Dispute. Cost him his job at Genev's around 1798-99.
What got him into so much trouble? It wasn't outright atheism, was it?
Not exactly. His problem was with traditional theism, the idea of God as a separate, transcendent being, a king of the world who created everything, intervenes, judges, rewards, punishes.
He rejected that completely.
Flat out. He thought that kind of view often degenerated into superstition, even idolatry, worshiping little gods, as he put it.
So if God isn't that transcendent creator, what is God for Fichte?
God is the moral order itself, the living, active, ethical principle working within the universe and within us. His famous line sums it up: the living and effective moral order is God himself. We need no other God, nor can we understand another.
So God is essentially the moral law made manifest, similar to Kant's idea of God as a postulate necessary for morality, but maybe more immanent.
Exactly. It's like taking the Protestant Reformation's push for internalizing faith to its absolute philosophical conclusion. You don't find God through external revelation or churches. You find the divine in the moral striving of the rational self.
And this links back to his ethics too, right? True happiness isn't about pleasing an external God or for rewards.
Correct. True happiness, the Glückseligen Leben or blessed life, comes from achieving independence from nature through pure moral action. It's not about worldly pleasure or heavenly rewards promised by traditional religion. Religion's role isn't compensation, it's the recognition of the moral order as the divine.
His ambition was just immense, wasn't it? Trying to forge this single, unified system, the Wissenschaftslehre, where knowing and doing, theory and practice, were just two sides of the same coin.
A completely unified system of reason. And, even critics admitted the system itself was remarkably coherent, incredibly rigorous in its internal logic. He really did try to show how consciousness developing and reality unfolding were the same process, all driven by this engine of freedom.
Looking back, his work really forces you, the listener, to grapple with that core tension. The power of radical self-determination, this active I, versus the inescapable reality of the external world, the non-I that resists it.
It's a tension that arguably defines modernity in many ways.
And that leads us to a pretty challenging final thought to leave everyone with.
If Fichte's logic holds, if achieving genuine security and freedom for everyone really does demand a state structure so encompassing that it manages the entire economy,
then is the ultimate price for that guaranteed security and material flourishing the surrender of individual economic freedom of private enterprise.
could it be that Fichte's seemingly extreme closed commercial state is, paradoxically, the only way to ensure that abstract philosophical freedom actually translates into a decent life for all? Or does the necessary control inevitably stifle the very freedom it aims to enable?
Difficult question. Is total security worth the price of that specific kind of liberty? Or is that the only path to making freedom real?
A deep dive indeed. Thanks for exploring Fichte's demanding radical vision with us.